Hello out there, you wonderful people. This is Andre, the Game Idea Guy. Thank you once again for lending me your time and your ear, listening into another video from me. And I this I got wind of this article through Google Plus through Richard Dixon. So thank you for showing this to me. And I left like a long comment on on his post, but I wanted to go through this article because there's some signs of revisionist history here that people tend to forget things that happened and act as if other things just never existed or never happened at all. And this is the article of the the title of this article is Nintendo Switch isn't promising or something along those lines. Personally, I don't care what your personal opinion is on the thing because that's your personal opinion. I can't really change that. But there are some things that when I looked at this article and I read it, and I'm like, hmm, some either somebody's memory is faulty or they're changing things to fit the purpose of what they're saying in the article. Now, granted, there are some things that they say possibly, whatever. Those are their concerns. I have no argument for their concerns. But when I look at what they've said, and I think about things that have happened because this I grew up during this time. I remember a lot of these things. I'm looking like what? Okay, just bear in mind with me. I'm going to read through it and I'm going to like analyze it. And then there's something else I'm going to show you after I read this, which is probably going to be like, well, what does this person have to say now? So, and mind you, this article or blog post or whatever the hell you want to consider it, this was put out yesterday. So, and I'm reading this right now. Okay. See, I have a friend who will never let me forget a piece of bad advice I once gave him. It was 2001. He wanted to know whether he should buy the new Nintendo GameCube, Sony's PlayStation 2, or Microsoft's debut video game console, the Xbox. I told him to go with the GameCube. Oops. So, firstly, I want to point out, do you not know the type of games that your friend likes? Because that's one of the things I would make me question whether or not that was a bad choice. Because one, the GameCube had lots of games on it, tons of them, and most of them were good. Moving on. Bear with me because there was a method to my madness, or so like to tell myself. Nintendo's previous console, the N64, was great. It had fantastic titles like GoldenEye 007, Star Wars Rogue Squadron, which are games I still remember fondly. The first PlayStation, its main competitor at the time, had a lot of good sports titles, but I felt you were better off with Nintendo if you weren't into those. One thing I want to point out, Nintendo also had a bunch of sports titles on the 64 back then. And another thing, the PlayStation, well, because they're gonna make a point about how the GameCube sold versus the PS2, but the PlayStation outsold the N64 massive amounts as well, and also the other competitor at the time, which was the Sega Saturn, which people tend to want to forget existed. Um, Microsoft, meanwhile, was a newcomer to consoles, not necessarily because they had helped Sega develop the Dreamcast, so it wasn't exactly like it was completely brand new to them. It was just the first time that they helped with the one console previously, and then they put their name on it as the front runner, which was like literally the Xbox is basically a souped up Dreamcast, which is another console that's just completely negated being spoken about. But I guess it's because Sega isn't a current console company. No one knew at the time what it would that it would eventually become a juggernaut in the field. Nintendo, on the other hand, had a long pedigree in games. The company knew what it was doing, supposedly. Yeah, because they still make tons of money. They've only recorded losses like a couple times. Like, I swear people act like they know business. Like, you don't really know it. I don't, and I'll admit it, but apparently you definitely don't. My friend did indeed follow my advice, only to end up cursing me because of it for the next few years while all those PS2 and Xbox owners were having a blast playing games like Grand Theft Auto 3 and Halo. Grand Theft Auto 3, which at the time was only on the PS2, and Halo at the time, which was only on the Xbox and PC. Those wouldn't have come to the GameCube. Those likely wouldn't have come to the GameCube anyway. Oh man. Mm. My friend and a few million other unlucky suckers sat around watching their GameCubes collect dust as game developers avoided it like the plague. So Ubisoft avoided it, Sega avoided it, Konami avoided it. Um, no, I think they all did develop games for the GameCube. Actually, the GameCube, from my memory, had more third-party support than the N64 did. Like, yeah, sure, there were some titles that didn't show up on the GameCube, but there were some third-party games that ended up on the GameCube that didn't go to either the PS2 or the Xbox. So that argument is null and void. It's literally a pointless argument. They didn't avoid the GameCube. There was actually a lot of them put more effort into the GameCube than they did the Wii or the Wii U. And a lot of them put way more effort into the GameCube than they did the N64. Okay. I tried to comfort my friend by telling him that I too was one of those suckers. Of course, as someone who wrote a lot about video games, I also happen to own the other two consoles in addition to the GameCube. Usually part of I usually left that part out of our conversations. So basically you deceived your friend, the person that you're calling your friend, when you had other ways to play these games and you couldn't say, hey, you can come over to my place and play some of these games on my stuff. You know, that would have been like the nice thing to do if this person couldn't afford to get everything and you could. But you decided to be a dick and say, hey, I'm not going to tell you I have the Xbox and the PS2 as well. Yeah, nice. Real nice of you there. That was awesome. Like that's a true friend right there. All right. It turns out Nintendo made some fatal miscalculations. Unlike its competitors, the GameCube couldn't play movies and use smaller mini DVDs, which had less storage capacity than regular sized disc. Okay, the only console that got off on the DVD kick was the PS2, and that was because it was the first one that launched with the DVD player in it. The Xbox, when it came out, it also had DVD playback functionality. It didn't sell off the shelves mostly because people had already had their PS2s and they weren't interested in Microsoft at the time. And then you also got to think about the fact that DVD playback in the Xbox, the original Xbox, unless you modded one, was basically relegated to you having to pay for the remote that you had to plug with the sensor that you had to plug into the Xbox. So I don't think it had anything to do with DVDs. And if we're worried about games not fitting on disc, there was also the multiple disc option at the time, and there always has been. There are games currently on the 360 right now that have multiple discs that are on the PS3 as one because of the capacity of the disc. So disc size has nothing to do with it. That really has nothing to do with it. It's just whether or not the companies wanted to do it. That's all it boils down to, is whether or not they wanted to do it. Like, so don't try to change facts or change the way things set up. Nah, buddy, that's BS. And even still, most of those games with the smaller disc, a lot of the games that were on PS2 and Xbox ended up on GameCube. So, wow. But I don't see complaints about, Resident Evil 4 having been on the GameCube and then later being ported to the PS2, but not being able to be on the Xbox because there was some sort of discrepancy with the controls. Hmm. Again, this is me trying to be fair-minded here and objective about it. I mean, I'm going to be somewhat subjective because I'm looking at the way this is worded and it's irritating the hell out of me. Games had to be smaller as a result, which resulted in lower quality graphics. Bullshit. B fucking S. Most of the games that were on the GameCube and the PS2 looked better and ran better on the GameCube. So that's bullshit right there. Mostly because the GameCube had better hardware in it. Yeah, it didn't play DVDs, but most people didn't want game consoles to play DVDs. That was just a bonus function of the PS2 and the Xbox if you had the DVD playback kit. GameCube wasn't properly geared for online play, which was starting to become a thing. Yeah, at the end of the generation, it started becoming a thing. And yes, the GameCube did have actually online games. If I remember correctly, Phantasy Star Online was one of those games that you could play online. And there were a couple others. There weren't a whole lot of them, mind you, but there were definitely games that you could play online on the GameCube. So again, facts aren't right here. Wow. So many things you can point out when you slowly read this shit. Ultimately, Nintendo was trying to be different, which in the world of technology is normally an admirable trait. In games, however, it's a kiss of death. Yeah, it's only recently become so because if you pay attention, you went back in time. Let's even just starting with the third generation. The Nintendo NES or the Famicom was vastly different from the Sega Master System. And the Sega Genesis was vastly different from the Super Nintendo. The Sega Genesis, the Sega Saturn, the PlayStation, and the 64 were all vastly different from each other. Even in the sixth generation, which you were currently talking about, the GameCube, the PlayStation 2, and the Xbox were all different from each other. Seventh generation, the Wii, the Xbox 360, and the PS3 were all different from each other. It's only become recent that things have to be nearly similar for some reason. And people act like that's like the worst thing ever. Okay. Third party game makers like to design their titles once and have them work across a range of hardware platforms. They hate having to spend extra time and money significantly tweaking those games for one specific console. But you know what happened when they had to do that? We had less game breaking bugs. We had less issues with games running well. We had far better programming when they had to actually think about each individual platform that they programmed a game for. So, is that really a bad thing? Okay. The GameCube wasn't a one off aberration in this respect. Nintendo has been making the same mistake over and over ever since. Yeah, and that mistake has been making them money. Mm. It was the same with the Wii in 2016 and the Wii U in 2012. Both offered innovative gameplay in the form of gesture controls and a tablet-like interface, respectively. But again, they were too different from their competitors. Game developers stayed away, and the machines fizzled out. A console is only as good as its library, after all. Okay, so we're going to talk about the Wii's library now. The Wii, which had many of the same games as the Xbox 360 and the PS3, even though they definitely didn't look as good, but they had a different play style. And the Wii was also one of the top selling console platforms made. It's the best selling home platform Nintendo has ever put out. And it has a huge library of games. So either you've never looked into the library of games and don't know your shit, and they're just talking out your behind at this point, or you just really just ignore everything else that has happened. Like literally anyone can do this. Go ahead and look up a list of the games that are on the Wii, and then look up a list of the games that are on the 360, and a list of the games that are on the PS3, and you'll find that there are a lot of titles that are the same between the three of them from third parties. Yeah, they'll have a different play style on the Wii, but there were a lot of them that were on the Wii that were the same as the 360 and the PS3. The Wii versions usually had some stuff stripped out because it just wasn't capable enough of rendering all that stuff all at the same time. And let me see, one of the highest rated games of the seventh generation is Super Mario Galaxy. Correct? That's on the Wii. That's a part of that amazing library. There's I swear it's just like this person again, either they ignored a bunch of stuff or they're just trying to change things around to make it seem like, hey, Nintendo's been in dire straits this whole time. Then on top of this, everyone ignores handheld for some reason. Like you'll ignore the DS, you'll ignore the Game Boy, you'll ignore the Game Boy Advance, and you'll even ignore the 3DS. All of these things have been successful for Nintendo. All of them. The only one that was truly, utterly a failure for Nintendo was the Virtual Boy. And everyone knows that, and we all know why. The Wii U, while it doesn't have quite the library of Nintendo's prior consoles, it does have some pretty good games on it. Some pretty amazing games. And on top of that, it actually launched with a lot of third party support. It fizzled out. I'll admit that. The third party support for the Wii U fizzled out like within the second year. But it launched with a lot of third party titles. Granted, most of those were already on other platforms, which is the issue that I myself have been having with people wanting ports of games from the Wii U. Like, you didn't want ports from other consoles on Nintendo, so you want Nintendo ports on Nintendo when you wouldn't buy Nintendo for Nintendo games. Doesn't make much sense to me. I just personally doesn't make much sense to me. Um, History looks to be repeating itself with the Switch, Nintendo's seventh major console, which launches on March 3rd. As with its three immediate predecessors, okay, the Switch's main selling point is its differentiation. That Nintendo's selling point for all of their platforms has been how they're different. Like, that's literally how how they sold the Nintendo. Again, the Famicom. That's how they sold the Super Nintendo, Super Famicom. That's how they sold the N64. That's how they sold the GameCube. That's how they sold the Wii. And that's how they sold the Wii U. By propositioning it as something different. That's what they literally done with everything. That's the same thing that they've done with their handhelds. It's again, it's like people forget things or they really don't know shit and they're just talking out of their asses again. Rather than just being a home console, it also features a tablet-like controller which can be separated from its dock and played on the go. No, 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 dude. It's literally the tablet itself. All the hardware is in the tablet and the controller's attached to the tablet. That's not the same thing as having a tablet-like controller, which the gamepad was. You can't take the parts off the gamepad and play with them separately and act like they're going to work as a separate controller, and you can't put them on a different piece, a different piece, and have them function as one whole, fully made controller, or separate those two pieces and have them work as two separate controllers. You can't do that with it. It's the first two-in-one console that delivers the same gameplay whether it's being used at home or portable. But just like its three immediate predecessors, the Switch is very different from its competitors and is launching with a dearth of games as a result. Do you mean to tell me you haven't checked any of the updated list and seen that there are at least like 60 games set up for the Switch that have been announced so far? I swear it's like people don't take the time to go back and look. Like if this guy's going based off of what we got shown on January 12th, I can understand where his lack of understanding is coming from. But there's something I'm going to show you about the difference between the Switch and its competitors right this moment that would make this argument that he's making kind of stupid. Um, there's the anticipated Nintendo-developed Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild and 1-2 Switch, a collection of mini games that showcases the unique console's unique capabilities. There are also a few third-party games like Just Dance 2017, Skylanders Imaginators, and Super Bomberman R, the first two of which are already available on other consoles, including the Wii U. That shouldn't be a shock, and Breath of the Wild is also going to be available on the Wii U. Again, nothing that's surprising. These are things people already knew. Adding a few smaller titles from independent developers and an uninspiring lineup to say the least. Yeah, because the PS4 and the Xbox One also had great launch lineups. I think the best game to buy for the Xbox One at launch was Rise Son of Rome, and the best game to buy for the PS4 at launch was damn it, it's the shooter. The space shooter type game. I knew the name of the game, and right now I'm not. You know what? Fuck it. I'm never gonna worry about it. Somebody's gonna correct me down in the comments anyway. I've spent some time playing the Switch a press event recently, and it did little to inspire me. The portability function is neat, but it's not enough to convince me to plop my money down. Okay, that's cool. I have no argument with that. That's your opinion. There's nothing I can say about that. Evidently, the lack of supporting titles so far, third-party game developers are feeling much the same, which is why we shouldn't expect a catalog situation to improve much over whatever the lifespan of this console might be. If only my friend were to once again ask me which console he should buy, could perhaps make it up to him. I'd steer him clear of the Switch, which is looking like it's going to be as much of a dust collector as every other Nintendo console this millennium. Oh crap! I forgot about this dude's name. I was trying not to show that. um, Listen, whether or not a console collects dust, honestly, every console is going to collect dust no matter where you put it because one, heat draws in dust. When you turn it on, it gets hot, it warms up, it's going to draw in dust. That's a dumbass statement to make. Secondly, whether or not you play on it is again, people act as if when they don't do something, everyone else doesn't do it, or when they do something, everyone else does it. It's like this hive mind mentality. Like you have to have the same thoughts, you have to have the same views, you have to do the exact same thing as everybody else, or it's bad. But you know what? I'm done with this guy's article. You guys have seen everything I've had to say. You've heard everything I've had to say over it. Overall, there's a lot of stuff in this article where the dude like literally missed a bunch of shit, or just completely forgot about a bunch of things and didn't say anything. So I'm gonna jump over to, and I don't really like this website, but they have a decent article, and it's about the Binding of Isaac Afterbirth. Hold on, I gotta pause for a moment because I think one of my kids needs me. Okay, folks, I'm back. Now, again, I don't really care for Polygon, but this is a decent article. Now, Nintendo's never had the best reputation when it comes to being welcoming to independent developers. That's bullshit. Because all throughout the Wii and the Wii U, as well as the DS and 3DS, they have done a lot of work to bring in independent developers. Like it's like people just don't pay attention. Or because they don't know about something, they act like it doesn't exist. But I'm gonna move on. While a few tiny developers have managed to release games on Nintendo platforms in recent years, a lot of them actually have. If you look at the 3DS's catalog alone, there are tons of indie games on it. The total numbers are a fraction of what you'd find on on an Xbox or PlayStation. Not true. Is that likely to change with the Switch? We spoke to Tyrone Rodriguez, the president of Nicalis. I've never known how to say their company's name, so like just don't hold that one against me. Whose company has 3 Switch games planned, including one launch title, The Binding of Isaac Afterbirth Plus. Nicalis? I think this Nicalis is one of the smaller developers that has worked with Nintendo steadily in recent years. We were fortunate enough to have prototype developer hardware for the Wii U, 3DS, etc. So we already had a good relationship with Nintendo to get to the Switch a little bit early, said Rodriguez. That insight into Nintendo platforms of yore has proven useful. Afterbirth Plus launched just last month on PC, and to see it transition to a console so quickly is almost unheard of in the indie space. A big part of that speed is thanks to the Switch's new development tools, explained Rodriguez. The Switch is by far the easiest and most programmer friendly so far. He said, I know this sounds like a lip service to Nintendo, but it's actually not. If it wasn't true, we wouldn't be able to get these games up and running as quickly as we have. And we wouldn't be able to have a launch title. It's light years ahead of what we were doing with the Wii U. Another effective technique was to unify their games across multiple platforms, further decreasing porting time, achievements, for example. We put hooks in. We put in hooks in. I think that's supposed to be we put our hooks in, so the code will work. Oh, we put in hooks in so that the code will work on any platform. Rodriguez said. So, for example, if there was a console that didn't have achievements, you can't have achievements on those games. But in the case of Isaac, we built the achievements right into the game. Rodriguez is still under NDA with Nintendo until Switch launches and apologized for the need to remain vague regarding Switch functionality. I don't think he needed to apologize for that. Rodriguez also mentioned that in addition to his team's three announced titles, Isaac, Red Out, and 1001 Spikes, they have way more Switch games in development. They'll have competition now. Other indies have been announced for the Switch, including Stardew Valley and Tumbleseed. We used to enjoy the lack of developers coming to Nintendo consoles. It was a lot less competition, said Rodriguez, but it's not a bad thing. More good games on every platform is good for the industry, and I'm very happy Nintendo is trying to get more games on this for this platform. So, the point of me showing this was to basically say Nintendo has gone out their way to make it easy to develop for, to port games to the Switch from other platforms. They went out their way to make sure that it was as easy as possible. Which I've said that before in another video, that they went out their way to make sure it was easier for developers to put their games on a Nintendo Switch. And again, we also know from EA that Nintendo has been talking to third-party developers since the inception of the idea of the Switch. They've had talks with them about what they wanted, what they needed, what would help to get games put on it. So, them being different in this case should literally have no effect on whether or not they get games that are of the same quality. And I'm not talking visually, but I'm talking about how it runs, how it plays. There should be no problems there. Translating it from one platform to the next. From one platform over to Nintendo's. Which was the point that I'm making, that this person kind of implied that that was going to be impossible because the Switch is different. So overall, this guy's argument is kind of BS. It's kind of been shut down. And this is today. This was yesterday. This is today. Kind of makes me wonder if this person that wrote this saw this or even paid attention. Also makes me wonder if they paid any attention to the fact that third-party developers have been like, and I'm a little skeptical of it myself, but so far, third-party developers have been extremely positive about the Switch and talked about how much they loved it and how great it is and how great their games will work on it. All points that were completely ignored in what they were saying about the Switch. And again, this isn't because I'm trying to defend the Switch. This is because I see something stupid and I want to point out the stupid shit within it. So, but you guys go ahead and check. I'll put the links for these articles down in the description. You can go ahead and look them over yourself. All you want. I mean, I just went over them here, so you don't really have to, but you probably might get a different interpretation just reading it without my voice to it. So thank you guys very much for listening. Keep your eyes and ears out for more stuff from me, and until the next time, please enjoy your games.